So I just finished The Prisoner by Marcel Proust. And it's actually a novel within a novel. It's the Albertine novel. And the narrator had met this girl, Albertine, much earlier in the book. So this is the fifth volume. He met her, and I think like the second volume. And he met her. He was on the beach on vacation. She's sort of like this beach bum girl, and like 1,000 pages go by, and then this book starts where after long courtship and going back and forth, she finally moves into his house. He's living with his mother, and she's like out of town. So it's the narrator who's like interchangeable with the author. So it's Marcel, and he moves her in with the housekeeper, and the mother's gone. She has like her own room, and Marcel is this like sick, bedridden, asthmatic invalid. The narrator and the author, he's like this pitiful sight. He can't leave the house. And what happens is he gets this girl in who's seemingly much younger, much more energetic, lively, youthful. She wants to be socializing. And the book kind of has like a very, very thin plot as far as like action. But what makes it so disturbing and perverse and dark is this sort of like the love interest and like the romance of the book is him trying to keep her in the house. He doesn't want her leaving. Meanwhile, she keeps leaving. And he like sends people out to follow her. When she's in, he like tries to kind of distract her, and he'll buy her dresses and buy her jewelry and do all these things to try to keep her in the house. And that's sort of the plot of the book. What it expands on is the narrator talking about everything. And it's what makes the whole thing. This is like the whole entire book. I read the fifth volume, which is this one. So it's a long book. And what makes it so like singular is the way that it's written. Because it's not like reading like Henry James or Thomas Hardy or Dickens, where you have an author saying, there's characters, there's a plot, I'm going to tell you about the characters and how they're involved in the plot, and then we're going to wrap it up, and that'll be a book. He doesn't do that. Instead, you're in the narrator's head. So it's as if you're peeking through a hole of a man sitting on a couch in front of a psychiatrist. And he's not just telling you about all of the people that he's met. He's telling you about every thought that goes through his head. And in a lot of ways, it almost makes it a bad novel. It doesn't follow any of the rules that you would think a novel follows. But it's beautiful. Unlike any other book, there's nobody that writes like Marcel Proust. Nobody. And you can think about like how other authors have influenced future generations. There's no one writing going, oh, I was influenced by Marcel Proust, and you can't do it. I think I've never come across anybody. He was famous for writing long sentences, which he does, and you can find that in like more modern works, but it either comes off as self-indulgent or purposeful. So at some point, Proust was, I'm pointing as if he's sitting next to me. Um, Proust was like known for it, had written the longest sentence, um, and it's always sort of contested. Like Joyce, um, around the same time, had one of the longest sentences. It was like 40 pages. But Joyce cheated. He just took out all the periods, and it was like this long run-on thing. It's the end of Ulysses. It's beautiful. Um, David Foster Wallace comes to mind, who's he wrote in like the 90s, I think, and he was writing long sentences purposefully. It's as if he sat down, in my opinion, said like, I'm just going to write a really, really, really long sentence, and people are going to be proud of me or something. Proust did it naturally. Like, as you read it, it seems as if there was no other way it could have been written. And the way that I sort of absorb it is it sounds like someone's talking to me. Because people don't really talk in sentences. Everything just kind of flows along and goes one into the next, and you have all these clauses. And just like someone telling you a story, he's a bad storyteller in the sense that he doesn't necessarily follow a logical sequence. He goes back and forth in time. He'll forget things, have to tell you later. Or he'll forget things and turn out that like he's not exactly saying the same thing once that he had said before. So maybe he's an unreliable narrator. Yeah, so I mean, mesmerizing. I should say there's René Chateaubriand, who was before him, who was an influence on Proust and did write a lot in the manner in which Proust wrote. Chateaubriand wrote Attila and René. They're kind of thin little novels. And he also wrote memoirs, which is an obvious influence because this reads like a memoir. And maybe Virginia Woolf. This is my second time reading the book. And just like this past week when I was reading it, one of the things that was amusing me was the wealth in the book. So, the narrator, his household seemingly has like this infinite source of money. So there's always people coming into the house, in and out of the house. They're having deliveries. Andy, it's chewing. They're always having like deliveries, like things are getting dropped off. They have people that come over and have like letters that are getting picked up. You can tell they're rich because they recently got a telephone, and it's the 1920s, and the automated revolutions happen. So like little, they have a car. Cars are popping up in the book. But what was amusing me about it is how many of the things in the book that were sources of the top upper crust of wealth back then, which I have now. So I have Amazon packages just flowing in all the time, phone in my pocket, just all these little things that like are taken for granted now, which back then you had to be like a prince to have. You were going to have someone pick up a letter for you, especially, and take it somewhere else, so someone could get your message in the city on the same exact day. that meant you were doing really well. So I thought that was interesting. What else do I want to say about the book? Towards the end of the book, there's a conversation where Proust is talking about different authors, and he's talking to Albertine. And he talks about like Hardy and Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, I think. And they're having sort of like a nice, bittersweet conversation. It's sort of the end of the relationship, but they're speaking civilly, and it's interesting. And Proust says, "Isn't literature so much better when you talk about it?" Which, for me, just like rings. It's so perfect. And I'll tell you what, one other scene early in the book, which I thought was funny, because there are some funny parts about the book in a kind of dark way. This is where she finally moves in. He's got this girl that he's been pining over all this time, and now she's in the house. And he goes, "I hate her." This is early on in the book. All of a sudden, she's in the other room, not doing exactly what he wants. And it says a lot. The name of the book is The Prisoner. So you really get a sense. The book that comes after is called The Fugitive. So I won't spoil anything, but... and the last thing I'll say, which is something that just sort of interests me, is on translation. So this is a new translation. The original one, or like the standard translation, is by C.K. Moncrief, I think. And he translated this book as The Captive. I never really thought anything of it until this new one came out. And I looked it up, and the original French title is Le Prisoner, or however you say that in French, but Le Prisoner. And I just like love that like there's this new translation, and they like thought about it like, how am I gonna translate Le Prisoner? And then they go with The Prisoner. Like I'm not a scholar, but I think like I could have translated that. I'm being a little silly, but I guess I'll kind of wrap up there. It's amazing. I can't talk about much of the book. I mean, read it. It's really great. So I'll kind of wrap up. This is more of a rambling video, which is fine. But please leave a comment if you would like. Thank you if you've watched this far. We're still working on the audio, so bear with me. And thank you for watching.